Hi everyone, and welcome to our Talk Pensions and Benefits UK podcast. Steph Nuttall joins me today, all the way up in the north of the country. Steph, thank you for joining me from Lloyds Banking Group. It's great to have you on as a guest.
No problem, looking forward to it.
In what is one of our final episodes, at least one of the final ones now, we're recording this kind of late January, and I think it's been a hell of a lot of fun, and I know I've said it before, but I want to thank all of our guests, Steph, of course, to you and everyone that's already been on beforehand. But I think work commitments are just too manic to keep this going, so we might just hit the pause button and maybe pick this up once things die down. But it is great to have Steph on board today. Steph and I have worked together a few times before successfully, and I think we're going to present a very kind of interesting topic, and a very important topic, where we're talking about what have we learned from perhaps past experiences that we've put into practice during the last kind of 10 months with lockdowns and remote working, and likewise perhaps what we've learned during COVID about ourselves and about our colleagues and our employers that we're going to take forward. I think that's fair to say, isn't it, Steph? I think that's the agenda, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been, you can describe the last 10 months as many things, but it's certainly given us all a lot of food for thought, and I'm one of those. And there's things that we can't wait to leave behind, but there's things that we can take forward with us as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose to get us started then, because this is the conversation that you and I had the other day when we were planning this, you know, what are some of the key takeaways for you personally? You've taken some time to kind of ponder and reflect on the last kind of 9 or 10 months. What are the key kind of positives that you're going to take away from this into 2021 and beyond?
So I think, excuse me, one of the biggest positive things is I was already a big advocate of my employer because they've been hugely supportive of me over the years. But I think we saw in the pandemic that you really started to see employers distinguish themselves in the way they responded to how this was impacting their staff. And Lloyds has been great. So there has been open, transparent messaging from the leadership throughout that seems to have struck just the right tone with colleagues. And there has been assurance in practical terms around nobody needing to worry about the impact of COVID on them if their circumstances mean that they're not able to fulfill all their duties. That's understood, and it's not something that there is a penalty for. So I think that the fact that there was that colleague focus meant a lot to people, and at a time when everybody felt quite disorientated and quite isolated, knowing that, you know, the employer was behind you was a big part of what made people get comfortable with the situation. And I know that there have been other colleagues, people who work for other organisations who haven't had that same experience, who haven't felt that same support, and it's made the whole situation a whole lot harder. So I think it's sort of brought home something that I already knew, which is that it really does matter the organisation you work for and whether they share your values about what's important. And one of the huge benefits actually for me personally over the last 10 months has been being able to be at home more. Beforehand, I was doing a heck of a lot of travelling. The East Coast Main Line was my best friend, and I haven't missed it. And being able to be at home, not spend all that time travelling, not be away from my children, has actually been, you know, one of the biggest gifts of all of this. Which isn't to say that it's all brilliant, that I do wish that I could be with my colleagues face to face, and I am looking forward to getting an element of that back. But there's definitely been some real positives out of it as well, and I would hope that we don't lose all of those when we do have the choice again about how we work.
No, definitely. You've hit the nail on the head on a couple of really, really key subjects there. I mean, from my side, I actually had this conversation this morning with someone where about a year ago, they were absolutely desperate to get out of their current role, their current employer, for a couple of different reasons. The most common one that we deal with, funny enough, it isn't money. A lot of people assume that people come to us because they want a pay rise. It's very rarely money. I mean, that's part of it sometimes, but it's very rarely the main reason. A lot of the times it's, career progression, whether they feel valued, whether they feel empowered, do they have any kind of form of autonomy? They're usually the key kind of points. And this person in particular didn't have any of those. There was no real progression. They've been promised progression for a little while, but those promises have been broken. They were being micromanaged a little bit. So there was a few frustrations. And we'd actually lined up a couple of things, and I think it's, without counting your chickens, it definitely looked to me that was a placement. That is, a walking placement for us. But then she decided, no, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to see how the land lies in the summer. And I spoke to her again in the summer. No, do you know what? They've actually been quite good. I'm going to see how it is in the new year. So we had our conversation this morning, and she said, no, they've, yes, those niggles are still there. There are still issues that need to be addressed, but they've actually been fantastic, in terms of, don't feel like you have to work 9 till 5. If you need to look after your kids, you need to take the dog for a walk, you need to go and do all of this stuff, look after yourselves. Here's loads of other stuff that we're going to put on for you in terms of, mental well-being, financial well-being. Here's some extracurricular stuff in terms of pub quizzes and yoga and what have you. And I think a lot of people have realized that, yeah, they might have those frustrations, but their employer's pretty spot on. Do you know what I mean? And then you end up sitting there and thinking, yeah, you appreciate it a little bit more, and that breeds loyalty. Likewise, there are plenty of others who have thought, I'm not sure I want to stay here for the longer term. There's been some horror stories, one of which was an employer who shall remain nameless was insisting that everyone return to the office. No social distancing, no spacing out of desks, but people had to wear a mask. So, we'll wear a mask, we go to the supermarket, we put on a mask, we go out, we go and, pick up the kids from school, we need to wear a mask. That's fine, but I don't think anyone is particularly impressed having to wear them, 9 hours straight whilst working, when they could just do it at home without needing to, and being just as productive, or even arguably more productive. Is that what you find? Because you've just made a great point about not having to travel up and down to your other offices, London, Bristol, Scotland. Do you find yourself now way more productive? Even if you don't work the same set hours, you're actually achieving so much more.
Definitely in some areas, and I think it's a question where it's not a one size fits all. And I think that the teams that have been successful in adapting to or coping with the current situation are the ones that have embraced the fact that everybody is different, everybody has a different situation, and everybody has a different need. And personally, I think there are some areas of my work that I'm definitely better at with this way of working. So it gives me more headspace, because it means that the time I was spending dashing about, I'm not spending that time there. I can do the more future focused, bigger picture stuff far better, because there is that quieter time in my day available. And I'm finding that there are a lot of our BAU processes that have transferred really, really well to working from home. I think the piece that that people still find difficult is, however good the technology is, you lose an element of the spontaneity of having a group in the office and exploring an idea. And I think we've particularly noticed that at the outset of projects, and wanting to be able to initiate things and have those kick-off meetings where you get that energy in a room. And that's the element that I think we're still exploring. How do you replicate that? How do you find an alternative? And I definitely think that's the first element, that when it is possible to safely do face-to-face working again, that will be the priority, to be able to do that type of work where, you know, you really do benefit from those very free-flowing discussions that just are easier to have when you're all in a room. So I think it's taking the wins, but continuing to work on the areas where it perhaps still doesn't feel like the most natural way of achieving your objective.
Yeah, definitely. And I've had this conversation again with a lot of people, including my own colleagues, and I think that's something that I'll hold my hands up to. I think one of my biggest strengths is, you know, getting on with the work at hand. You know, if there's a job to do, let's get on with it. And I'm happy to start at the crack of dawn, you know, to do that. I'm always up early, so I'll start working, and I fit the hours around me and around my lifestyle, around my kids. But it's that spontaneous stuff. It's the conversations that we as a team are frequently having about, oh, I've just got off the phone with this firm. They're going to be looking for X, Y, Z. Oh, what about John Smith? You know, right, you know, if you start, yes, you can ping around emails and WhatsApp messages, but it's not as free flowing, is it? It's not as creative when you start to think, you know, we were brainstorming the other week about what can we do to continue this visual work that we're doing on LinkedIn. You know, we're not marketing professionals, but we want to keep out there. We want people to know us and feel like they do know us and feel like they can reach out to us to have conversations. But what else can we do? And you can have a brainstorm, but when there's 5 of us on Zoom, it's like, oh, hold on, wait, you're interrupting there. Oh, hold on, I couldn't quite hear. It just kind of takes the shine off it a little bit. So I can imagine that's what you guys get when you are planning a project or an initiative or something like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the areas where obviously that is far more of a concern is in our trustee meeting space, and that's something they've given a lot of thought to, and we're continuing to work with them to think, well, what is good going to look like going forward? And it's definitely, I think, accelerated the conversation around what does good look like in that trustee governance space. It doesn't have to look like all-day meetings, but there is also a real concern about, is quality debate still able to happen in these formats? Is it as organic when you have people putting their hands up digitally in Teams as it is when you can read one another in a room? So it's definitely been an area of focus for us, and we've all adapted and improved at that as time has gone on, but it's finding the way to plug the remaining gaps. I think that is the bit that we still need to focus on in 2021.
Yeah, no, and on that point then, if we use the trustee meetings as the example, you know, I'd use interviews, you know, as a similar thing. You know, yes, they're great via Zoom and Teams. You know, it's a good substitute. You know, you could argue it's a little bit more relaxed, and you know, you don't have to play around with diaries too much. But let's not forget, it is a substitute. You know, and we all want to get back to being in a room together, feeding off the body language, the emotion. You know, and working together, which is so much better and easier. You know, I think most would agree in person. Would you agree then? With those trustee meetings, it served a purpose and will continue to do so for as long as it needs to, but it's not a ongoing, we're going to do this indefinitely kind of deal. We need to get back face to face working together again.
Yes, for elements of it. I think there's bits where it's the smart solution. You know, if you are doing more transactional work, if you're doing that kind of, we need decisions to keep the wheels on the bus, then I think it can be very effective. But where you really want to explore an issue, or you want to probe things a little further, there's such value in the face-to-face and getting the best out of that. And interviews are a great example as well. I've interviewed this morning for a role. you have a whole new set of challenges when you're doing interviews remotely, because you've got people's Wi-Fi connections to think about. And what we've found ourselves doing is apologising to candidates for not maintaining eye contact with them, because I can be scrupulously maintaining eye contact with where somebody is on my screen, and it still looks like I'm staring into the middle distance. And things like that can be so unsettling for somebody who's in that interview position. So it comes with a whole different set of stresses, I think, when you have to do those kind of conversations, and you're left with that little just niggling doubt. Is this really the right outcome? Have we really got the best out of this? So yes, I think there will always be a place for where meetings are better done face to face. But if I can cut out even half of the journeys I used to make and replace them with remote meetings in the future, I'd definitely be all for that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you used the eye contact example, because I'm going to say it now, and I've said to quite a few people, and I'm going to say it to you, Steph. You on my screen are slightly to my left, so I am looking you in the eye. I am maintaining eye contact to have a conversation. But I know there's a lot of people that I speak to very, very regularly on these calls that watch these, and it's the same thing to you all. I'm going to look into the camera. It's the same thing to you all. I am looking at you. I'm not just staring off.
Yes.
But it's yeah, it's those little challenges. And yeah, I've had scenarios where we've had pets walk across the screen, which is hilarious. We've had dogs barking, we've had kids gate crash, and it does add a bit of familiarity. It does add that informality. It makes it a bit more relaxed, right? But at the same time, it's not ideal. It's not something
Yes.
to take moving forward. And like you say, if you've got Wi-Fi connection that keeps dropping out, if you haven't got the best, laptop screen, you may not be able to see what's going on. There's so many other issues to it. So yeah, it's good, but not a substitute. It's good in some ways, but in other ways, you can't beat the face-to-face interaction, can you?
Yeah, I mean, you may have noticed a little bit of camera wobble 5 minutes ago. I now have a border collie just underneath the screen who decided she needed to come and say hi. So I managed to keep her out of view, and she's now happily sitting here. But yes, the what's outside of the camera frame, it could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah. No, I think there's been a few scenarios where my hands kind of drifted off, and it's because I'm telling someone to go away, but don't leave me alone.
Yeah.
It has worked in my favour for what it's worth. I had a very intense kind of meeting with a new client, prospective client, who qualified actuary, very straight-laced, and that's fine. I could work that way. And we were having what was, I wouldn't say a challenging meeting, but it's just very matter of fact. It's just very direct, and there's no time. There was no smiling. It just is what it is. And he absolutely melted when my 4-year-old just appeared. And it was like, oh, okay, so that's what's needed, is it? If Daddy sounds like he's struggling on a call, send one of the kids in. Send the dog. Send the cats. Let's break down those barriers. So, but yeah, and coming back to the topic at hand. So that's what you've learned. That's some of the positive takeaways from this whole experience, and I think we've all got similar ones, and I think there's a lot of positives to take away, whether it's appreciating what we've got, realizing that there's a lot of people out there that are really, really under it, and if you are, please reach out for support, and if you're not, please be thankful that you're not. Do you know what I mean? What are some of the kind of challenges that you've had in the past? And I know you and I have had a conversation about this already, but what are some of the challenges that you've had in the past that perhaps set you up, put you into the right kind of mindset to be able to tackle this past year head on?
Yeah, I had an experience. I've had a number of experiences over the years, like we all have, that shapes your approach approach to your work-life balance and so on. But there was one massive one for me, and it really was the ultimate proof that you cannot control certain elements, and you have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to adjust and change course. And I started my career, I had done an undergraduate degree, I went into a standard graduate scheme, worked there, made good progress, decided I wanted to move to an in-house role, joined what was then HBOS, thinking that this was, a really good place to get some more experience. Never intended becoming a bank lifer, but I am still here nearly 16 years later. And a big part of that was that when I started my family, they were supportive even then, so we're talking about kind of 2006, 2007, of flexible working, part-time working. My career didn't suffer in any way for the fact that I had started a family and wanted to work part-time. But then my eldest son developed cancer when he was 20 months old, and he unfortunately, it was not able to be cured, and he passed away just before his second birthday. And that experience is something that you cannot prepare for that, and it sort of shakes everything about the way that you have thought about your life. And we did take, my husband and I, some time to really consider what is it that we want. And I had quite an extended break from work at that time, primarily because my second son was born during the time my eldest was on treatment. So I was on maternity leave in any case, and then my daughter arrived very quickly afterwards. So maternity leave meant that I had a lot of time and space to think. And at one point, as it probably wouldn't surprise anybody to know, we were thinking of all kinds of things. We were thinking that we were going to move to Australia, that we were going to, radically change our lives, because this momentous, huge thing that we sort of couldn't really find a reason for had happened. And over time, what we found was actually we like our lives. We had deliberately chosen the path that we had chosen, and we wanted to continue down it. And I was able to return to work, and the company was supportive of, very part-time working to begin with, so that I could very gently ease into someone else looking after my children. And they continued to offer me opportunities. I did training in operational excellence, getting qualifications in things like Lean and Six Sigma and so on, because it suited the business needs, but it also fit what I needed at that time. And then as time went on, my children became school-aged, and I was able to feel that I could step up at work. The opportunities were there and the backing was there. So even now I work a compressed working pattern. So I work full time, but across 4 days. And the company and the trustees are supportive of that. And so that kind of backing, I think, makes you realise just what is possible, and makes you feel that you can still have positive influences on where your career is going, even if you do want to do other things. You want to have a family, you want to have a sabbatical, you want to work part-time. It's still, with the right attitude, it's very possible to accommodate all of those things in a way that works for both yourself but your employer as well. And so, having kind of gone through all of that experience, I think it's hopefully meant that as my team have faced challenges, I can be empathetic, I can be a better manager for them. And, members of my team have had some huge challenges in the last 10 months. We have had some very close to home impacts from the pandemic. And what I hope it means is that I can put myself in their shoes. I can, be a good manager for them and make sure they have that experience too of, the company being behind them. And people sort of often say to me, well, there's nothing worse than losing your child. And I agree, there isn't. But it's not a competition. It's not about, ranking these things. The last 10 months have been tough on everybody, and everybody is in this situation, but not everybody has the same resources, not everybody has the same ways of being able to deal with it. So I think what it taught me is a sort of a respect for the individual, that this will impact, and any life event will impact different people differently. And I think you have to be able to respect individuals and meet them where they are. Some people think it's bliss being able to work from home all the time and not have to interact. Some people, it's been genuinely incredibly damaging to their mental health to have to work in this way. And I've got people who are juggling homeschooling, and then I've got people who live on their own, and that's been a whole different type of challenge for them. So I think it's over the years I've learned that the value is in being flexible and just really trying to listen to people as individuals and how they're feeling about things and try to understand them, which is a very imperfect science, but one that I hope I'm constantly reminding myself it's kind of fundamental to people being able to be successful at work.
Yeah, wow. It's one of those this is one of those moments where I can't even begin to imagine, and I'm thankful that I can't begin to imagine, as a father, as a human being, it's God, what do you say? Do you know what I mean? Right. And I remember you saying, when we kind of set up this call and when we were talking about kind of what we were going to talk about, I remember you saying that taught you how good an employer Lloyds are, how great they were then. And you said at the start of this call how great they've been throughout this pandemic, and I think, again, as a great takeaway, where you've sat there and said, it isn't a competition. It isn't a competition. I've spoken to some people who live alone and are loving it. I know people that live alone and hate it. I know people that live in a crowded house and hate it because they can't get any work done. Or there's people that are trying to work sat on their bed or sat on, hunched over a coffee table, or whatever it may be. Then I've put a lot of things into perspective for me, Steph. I don't mind telling you. There are times where I'll go out for a run and I won't take my headphones because it's the only peace I get, from first thing in the morning to last thing at night. It's the only silence. It's the only time I'm alone with my thoughts. But in many ways, who am I to sit here and be like, oh God, I hate how busy my house is. It really kind of pushes me to say that because, look at everything else we've got. We haven't suffered, thankfully. Touch wood, I haven't lost anyone close to me because of COVID. I haven't gone through what is the worst life event imaginable that you have. My employer's been fantastic. The market is manic, so it's great. The phone lives attached to my ear, which is obviously what we want. But yeah, I think you make a great point in terms of understanding that everyone deals with situations differently, and just because it's easy for one person doesn't mean it's easy for another, and just because some people can brush stuff off because they've got a thick skin doesn't mean that others can or should. I think that's probably again a very, very important point. There's no, it's not a case of you should get on with it, you should get over it, because, well, who says? Do you know what I mean? No one's got the right to say that, right?
And also, wouldn't the world be boring if we were all the same and reacted to everything in the same way? So, yeah, I think it does boil down to that respect for, for everybody being an individual, and everybody sort of it impacts everybody in a different way. When we have this kind of universal event, no two people are going to find it exactly the same experience.
No, and yeah, and the grass isn't greener, is it? Do you know what I mean? There's a few times I've spoken to a few people, some very, very close friends who, maybe do live alone or whatever, and they're, I'm jealous. I'm like, oh, I'd love to come. Can we swap places? You can deal with the three mad kids constantly fighting, and I'll come and just stay in your place on my own and just binge watch Netflix. But it's a novelty that wears off, and we wouldn't actually kind of give up what we've got, would we? So like you say, if the dog wasn't kind of finding their way around your feet, well, where's the fun in that? It keeps you on your toes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about dogs is that generally you can influence what they do. They behave themselves. The real challenge comes from the cats, because they were a bit of an impulse early lockdown addition to the household, and we have been completely taken aback because cats don't care. No. Cats just do what they want to do regardless. So that's been a big learning curve for us.
Yeah, I can't remember the phrase. I'm gonna have to look it up. But it's like I keep seeing memes actually about it all over Facebook and Instagram and Twitter about how a dog will literally kind of look up to you as if you are their world. You are a god to them. You are everything to them. But cats, no, they're your king. They're literally strut about. They don't care. I'm going to sit and if anything, a dog's probably really, really excited that we're working from home. They're probably sat there going, "Oh, it's great. You're not going to work. This is amazing." Whereas the cat's looking at you thinking, "Will you bugger off? Because I'm going to sleep
please?
Right there." Yes. Do you know what I mean? So, oh no. Well, listen, it's been great to chat to you, Steph. Thank you so much for telling your story. And there's so many takeaways we can all take. And I know I've spoken to a lot of people publicly. I've spoken to a lot of people privately, and I think hopefully this pandemic will end. I'm sure it will. Hopefully it'll be soon. We now have vaccines. We are heading in the right direction. Hopefully, it's now January, so Easter, the summer, September. At some point, we will ditch the masks. We will get back to normal. But as long as we're learning lessons from this about ourselves, about our colleagues, that's the way forward, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to chat to you. Thank you to our audience for watching and for listening. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon.